That's why I don't do it.
I'm all good. I'm just like happy when I get audio and video.
I feel that.
I'm good. How are you at sharing your screen?
I'm okay.
Are you okay?
Right. I have to be on my double screen, so if it's a lot,
Yeah.
I have to have the double screen up.
Ready? Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. How are you? We are here tonight, ready to begin our fourth session in bargaining. And I will put us on the record that we are October 27th, 2025. And we are here to bargain in session number 4. And I know that we have a sign-in sheet going around on both sides of the table, so we can sign in. And Ms. Yocum, do you have any remarks or otherwise before we get started as well? With your orange microphone
Yeah.
that we said represents
Okay.
Halloween.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. So we will go ahead and get started, and as other people, come in, welcome them, and we will hopefully have a good night.
All right. All right, so we will begin, and if you want to follow along on the screens that are out in the gallery, we will begin, and as we go through to Stephanie and her team will hand out hard copies of some of the language proposals as we go through. So the first thing we will begin with, and these are in the order as was presented by PEA last time, so we just kept them in the same order. We will begin with paid parental leave, and this is our counter. And I made a note that this is one of 6 because there were 6 that we put on the table, so I could track them through for both of our benefits. So this is the counter for teacher 20, para 6, and ESP 10. I didn't give the specificity of the article, but we can track that down. And let's go ahead and hand out that language as I walk through this. While the language is being handed out, and I think I will pause because I'm going to reference us to go to a specific page and talk through there.
Share, and maybe every other one.
Yeah, there's 10, I think, for each
Okay.
side. You need more later, we can run more.
And while we're passing these out, Ms. Pasco, I went to access our share folder and we don't have access anymore. Can you look at that tomorrow?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
That is actually a default security feature that it goes through anybody external. It looks so much time.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me know.
Okay. Thanks.
So if we will turn to page 3 of 7, we will begin going through the language that is a counter to what was presented last time by the union. The first bullet and the first note, you'll notice in the language there, it addresses eligibility. The employee must be active for 1 year with no break in service. And Stephanie, we'll get into the details here a little bit, because I've told with different ideas of 1 year being like a July 1 to June 30th, as you see in the second bullet. It's available once during an employee's contractual year. The more I thought about it, I thought 1 year, I would just leave it as active for 1 year because they come in at different times. So they establish the 1 year. And once the 1 year is established from date of hire, then they can access it once during that July 1 to June 30th period. If
So
that falls
you
by
would-
that.
So anybody in their probationary year would be ineligible for
Correct,
this.
because they'd have to work for 1 full year, but if they worked from August 2nd to May 31st, they would have worked, they need to have that 1 year of anniversary. So the probationary contract is August to May. But I think in this time, I was thinking from date of hire, just so you know where I was thinking. So if I'm hired August 2nd, then your anniversary would be, 1 year out from there. Once that's established, then you could access it once per contract.
So for teachers, if they are just asking for clarification, if a teacher starts on the very first day of their contract, they turn into annual contract on the last day.
Correct.
And so would that still be a provision here
I'm gonna say
For
no, 'cause
annual?
I need to follow up with IT, but I was making the rules, so you would have to work like a year. A year's anniversary date from August 2nd to August 2nd. And I'm gonna pause there. Ann, do you have feedback on that?
Yeah, can you say it again so I can hear it and try to put it in
So,
language?
yeah. So I'm trying to be very specific, so there's no questions later. If you look at the first bullet where it says employees must be active for 1 year with no break in service. If an employee is hired August 2nd, I would say the anniversary date would be August 2nd, a year from then. We're having a discussion where in other arenas we've been in, like a probationary contract teacher, if they work August 2nd to May 31st, they get their annual contract. But I would say this is a different piece because I wanted a 1 year anniversary to roll on the books, and then you fall into the July 1 to June 30th for access.
Correct.
Because I thought it would be easier to program that
That
for
is
the
correct.
1 year. Mhm.
So the way this translates, it's hard to think about it, but basically you're translating, if employed August 2nd and had continuous employment until May 31st, then you are eligible for this benefit. Like that's the kind of level of coding.
So then what Anna said would,
So, May.
well, but that would be like that annual, the way we do annual contracts for teachers. So then if they're rolled into an annual, then they would,
So let's change the example. I mean, we'll come back to probation. What about the teacher that was hired September the 4th?
That is my next question. So what you need to decide is at what point is someone hired in the year that they are eligible for this?
See, the September 4 would roll 1 year for
Mhm.
sure, which is why I was gonna follow the logic all the way through.
and then for our support staff, because they have a different probationary period, theirs is 90 days.
I would still
They
keep
would
the 1
still
year.
keep the 1 year.
We'd line them up all the same. So I think this was a discussion worth having because you may have questions later when you meet with your group.
Mhm.
So I wanted to be clear what my thought process was or what our team was thinking about.
Okay,
Because I think if we get into the different probationaries of 60, 90, 1 year,
Mhm.
I think we're gonna have a whole lot of challenges with respect to how we define, have you been there and active for 1 year?
And one of the things to think about is there is movement amongst the PEA lanes. And so the more consistent you are, the
Mhm.
better it is for your staff because especially with something like this, something could happen, they could move a job, just making that consistent for them so they know what
Mhm.
benefit they've got, when they've got, and we can push them through the system.
And so it would be continuous employment. So if a para moved into the teacher contract, we wouldn't look at their seniority date, we would look at their employment date.
That's the way I would review it.
Okay.
Right.
And then a question about FMLA intermittent leave. They would, if they happen to be on FMLA intermittent leave for whatever reason, they would still be an active employee and still be eligible. That wouldn't count as a break in service if they were on FMLA intermittent leave. Okay,
That is,
A leave is not a break in service on our side.
okay.
The third bullet is where I was really trying to figure. Not everybody, has the paid parental leave of their children fall in a very concise timeline. So this is an example of where 2 year discussion of a teacher that steps out for parental leave, May 20th.
Mhm.
It's gonna roll over into another year, right?
Mhm.
So I was trying to address that issue. So if shared between contractual years, may carry over, but will negate eligibility for a new paid parental leave of 15 days for the year adjacent to the days carried over. So what that means is I get all 15 days of benefit, even if it crosses over into the new year, it
Mhm.
crosses over. And I think the language in the contract that I said there, it says that it may carry over. If you'll see there, it says this leave is available once during an employee's contractual year, defined as July 1st through June 30th. Paid parental leave requests that share consecutive contractual years may carry over, but will negate eligibility for a new paid parental leave. So what that means is it's carried over into a second year.
Mhm.
You're not going to be immediately eligible in that second year because you've already had one benefit of that. So that was the logic there. So I wanted to be clear about the carryover. You'd be eligible again in the following year,
Mhm.
but you were already between 2 years.
Okay.
And honestly, I played around with eligibility in the last year or the first year, really didn't make any difference. Because one of the two, you're not going to be eligible in my thought
Yeah.
process.
Okay.
We made the notation here, we can look through the language specifically on page 3 about birth. An application for leave has to be accompanied by a written statement from a licensed medical provider. Verifying the pregnancy with an estimated date of delivery must be submitted to the risk management department no later than 30 days prior to the estimated date of delivery. In the event of emergency delivery, the application for parental leave will be accepted within 30 days of birth. And we also talk about adoption. And it has to be accompanied by documentation of formal adoption approved from a recognized court or agency. Must again be submitted to the risk management department within 2 weeks of the official adoption approval. Then we'll go down to the next bullet. It may not be used intermittently. So if we want to move on over to page 4 of 7. Item 1 there says parental leave may not be used intermittently. I know last time we had in there unless it was under the express approval of a superintendent or designee. It comes back really with respect to the programming and decoding. So we don't have the capacity to manually touch and break those up once we key them in. So we key them in and program you for 15 days, not here's 3 days, and later on, we're going to come back and grab 12 more. It's 15 in a lump sum, and we can't break it up.
On a question on the programming side of it, I know, and we had even talked earlier today just about other things that, as you guys are coding rules, if there needed to be a situation that was an extenuating circumstance for one person, is the system able to go in and we are able to make an exception? So like if there is an extenuating circumstance?
So what you want to think about in the system is you want to maximize the efficiency of a system, which means you want to set up rules so that 90 to 95% of the cases are able to go through the system.
Mhm.
So someone requests a parental leave based upon the rules in the system. It then applies those 15 days and their salaries remain intact and there's no issues with payroll. If you always have the benefit to make a change, if there is an exception and it has gone through the appropriate channels to request that, but you lose efficiency. When you lose efficiency and you're making changes, that oftentimes can result in frustration because the paycheck doesn't look the way somebody thought it to be.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but there's always a consequence to some of those
Mhm.
decisions. And now what you're going in is you're manually changing someone's pay, and you're changing this parental leave, so then you can run into other challenges. So yes, but I don't want it to be construed of, Wayne said we can change it and there will be no problems, because there could potentially be problems.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. I was just trying to think through. I mean, I don't know if we envision an exception like that happening very often, but I wanted to know if there was the leeway.
There's always the option when there is an exception that again goes through the appropriate channels, that is deemed appropriate, that is the decision the parties have made,
Mhm.
that needs to be done. There's always the option to go in and manually
Mhm.
change all of that. It just can create a lot of extenuating challenges. There's always the option for you.
And I kept trying to think about that question as well.
Mhm.
What would be the circumstance, the extreme
Mhm.
piece of where we would want to break it up?
I think we had talked about like, business helps today. I
Not
think
your voice.
She lost it.
y'all are the best. So I think we had talked about like, God forbid, you had a very, very sick child at birth. And like they were going in and out of NICU. And so, you needed to be able to be at the hospital with them for 3 days. But like I said, something like that, we were talking about like those very extenuating circumstances do unfortunately happen.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I have someone that I'm aware of in HR that their grandparent and their grandchild was in NICU. But in my mind, that would be child has been born. So the 15 days would come through the delivery and the mom's recovery, or maybe for the child after the fact. And I know what the NICUs, they're in there sometimes a
be.
long time.
Well, I'm talking more
Multiple
like
months.
surgeries, like they're
Okay.
born with a heart defect
So they've come home and then they have to go back.
and something.
So
So,
let's clarify the timing. Because Mr. Warren, we talked about the timing would be that the parental leave would be taken first. Because you have to have a first in, first out. You have to determine priority. Because in the case, if I understand correctly, Mr. Warren, this would be the parental leave, and then the employee has the option obviously, to take sick time.
Mhm.
So this case would be that the parental leave is happening first.
I'm thinking like, what if it's the father? So he didn't have to take out for birth, but now all of a sudden your child's back in for surgeries. And this would be a prime example of why the parental leave applies to him.
I'm still gonna come back and see if I can push for the 15 days without the intermittent. Only because we're sending it in as a chunk.
Mhm.
And if we don't, we're gonna have to track it. And I think if we start parsing out if then or this for that case or this person, I think we'll be chasing ourselves down a rabbit hole a lot. If we just say right out of the gate that you get 15 days, that's your 15 days upfront. So let's think about the dad. If he's gonna take FMLA, he's gonna be out for 12 weeks. So the first 15 days, he's been fronted already 15 days without it
Mhm.
tapping any of his leave resources yet.
Okay.
So
So,
they could take an FMLA, I guess, in bits and pieces.
yeah.
But
Well, and one of the, so in what, I know in our proposal, and I was trying to read through it to see if it was addressed in your counter. Your first proposal for parental leave, they had to use it within the first 30 days. Okay, is it next?
Yeah.
No, it's at the beginning.
Okay, did I miss it?
Within the child's first year.
yeah, we changed. it.
Okay,
First
thank
year.
you.
So, and I wanted to kind of, let's go on down this number 2 and number 3, because once the 15 days are fronted right out of the gate with your approved
Mhm.
parental leave, you get 15 days. Beyond that, the employees may use accrued sick or vacation leave after the 15-day allotment of
Mhm.
parental leave has been utilized to maintain pay during FMLA or other approved leaves consistent with CBA board policy, state or federal laws. So,
Okay.
you know, that's the way it was intended. And I really want to minimize discussions of exception, only because I would like to front load chunks of 15 at a time and not track pieces
Yeah.
as we go through a process. Because that's the way the system will be programmed, and
Okay.
coded for any employee group. I mean, for any employee period,
Yeah.
irrespective of group. Question or item number 3, parental leave does not extend or modify rights under FMLA, so we're not getting into that. We had that on the table last time.
Mhm.
So I think that is parental
Okay.
leaves. Any other questions?
No, I think we're good with the questions on this one.
Now we'll transition to teacher authority, 2 of 6. This is the counter. We're gonna go ahead and hand language across the table here.
Again, like every other.
So in this counter, you're basically gonna see that I took the statement you presented in Article 10.42 and I moved it down to 10.43. And I want to talk a little bit about why,
Mhm.
how that works, and unpack a little bit, because I think I understood what you're asking about. I understand why it was on the table. But I went back, first of all, to the statute. I didn't run copies for
Mhm.
everybody. But if you wanted to write down, it's 1003.32, you probably already looked at it and seen it. But specifically in section 1 of that statute, it says that everything in this particular section of the statute and within the framework of the district school board's code of conduct. So remember last time we talked about the code of conduct can only be changed by the board. It was the board's right. So within the framework of the district school board's code of conduct, teachers and other instructional personnel shall have the authority to undertake any of the following actions in managing student behavior and ensuring the safety of all students in their classes and school and their opportunity to learn in an orderly and disciplined classroom. So that's where it establishes code of conduct belongs to the
Mhm.
board. Teacher has authority to remove. We're going to talk in a minute through the code of conduct that the admin has capacity to engage via the code. Teachers send them out by referral or discipline. There are multiple levels in the code. Got it here. There's actually like 8 different levels,
Mhm.
but specifically the ones that I thought were relevant to this discussion was a level 2 office intervention, where a principal or designee may intervene to address a student disciplinary matter. And they engage with the parent And there's another one where there is in-school suspension at level 4.
Mhm.
And as it goes and outlines what happens with in-school suspension, it's also listed here that in-school suspension is not offered at all Polk County schools. So
Mhm.
that brings us to, another issue. The second bullet on the board up there is the PEA proposal to remove the students from the remainder of the day. It had impacts that were different for elementary versus secondary.
Mhm.
So when I began to think about it, the elementary, if I'm your elementary teacher, you could be out of that class all day long.
Mhm.
If it happened as specials, you're just out of science or reading or whatever for the day or PE. Secondary, you could be out for 40 minutes, 45 minutes. But if it's a block period, that's a whole different situation.
Mhm.
And then there's the implications of where do they go and what are they going to do when they get there? So there's the whole piece of somebody's got to provide instruction and plans and everything. So is that a good use of instructional time to stop and change the momentum or however that would work? I was trying to get that in my head together, and it just seemed that it would be not only problematic, but it would be increased workload on teachers too, because they're the ones having to funnel the work and the plans of what happened in class that day. I've already talked about the code of conduct addresses a level 2. And only the board has authority to revise. And I've already talked about not all schools have ISS options. And the fact that students would require lessons from teachers. And then before I talk about the last bullet here, I want to go back to the statute because I said I wanted to explain why I moved between the two articles of 10.4.2 versus 10.4.3. So we've established code of conduct and the authority of admin and teachers with respect to student discipline. Item 3 in that particular statute it says the following. The teacher may send a student to the principal's office to maintain effective discipline in the classroom and may recommend an appropriate consequence consistent with the code of conduct. So I've sent you out from class, right? But then when you go to number 4 is the one that we're aware of, where
Mhm.
you actually remove the kid from class. A teacher may remove from class a student whose behavior the teacher determines interferes with the teacher's ability to communicate effectively with the students in class. And what it does, if you haven't looked at it out in the galleries, then it takes us down the process. We've actually got it codified in contract now because it follows statute.
Mhm.
There's the committees that we talk about, the student review committees, that takes us to that. So it was for that reason that I moved it from 10.4 to 10.4.3 because I felt it more aligned with, I'm removing from class. And the statute supports the fact that the student then can't be returned to class until the
Mhm.
committee's reviewed or otherwise. And the language that I added there is straight out of statute as well.
So with this language that we had originally proposed, we were not talking about permanent removal. The kid in question might not have ever had any discipline issues, and maybe they just came in and had a really bad morning at home, and they come in and they're acting crazy. And that happens. And we know that happens. And so the teacher that's dealing with this extreme behavior may not be asking for permanent removal, but that kid, and we already have existing language in 10.4-2
Correct.
that says in cases when the disruptive effect of the student's behavior is so extreme as to preclude the instructional process, the teacher shall indicate on the referral. So referral's already being written because they're going to be asking for this child to get out of the room for today. This is not necessarily a permanent removal where the placement review committee would be convened. Now, if a teacher is invoking their statutory right to remove a child permanently from their roster and the supervisor or site-based administrator does not agree, then the placement review committee would be convened for permanent removal off the roster. This language was literally just talking about temporary removal for the day because this student has been so extreme as to preclude the instructional process. And then shall indicate on the referral the need to remove the child temporarily from the room until such a time as the student, teacher, and principal or other appropriate authority resolves the situation. And so what we're seeing on our end is that a student might be exhibiting extreme behaviors, maybe not to the point where they're being asked for permanent removal yet. But if a child has exhibited such extreme behaviors in a classroom that's disrupted everybody's learning environment, we cannot continue as a system to have that one child's right to an education supersede the safe and effective quality learning environment for the other children and the staff in that room. And so it might warrant that child to be removed if it's an elementary core class, maybe for the day. And we are instructed to have our stuff on Schoology. So they do have access to academic learning on Schoology. But what we're trying to get at here is that, Tony had a very good example that we cannot have children being removed temporarily to come back 5-10 minutes later with a lollipop. And I don't say that hyperbolically either, because that literally happens. And while we support restorative practices, when that child has been able to act crazy and act a fool in a classroom, all of those kids now see the authority of that teacher being undermined. And that child cannot return to that learning environment. They can start fresh tomorrow, have a clean slate. We all believe in clean slates because kids deserve second, third, fourth chances, but they cannot come back that day.
So we talked about the candy and the lollipop behind the scenes after our last session. And I would say to you this, I believe you because you're telling me. I would like to have chapter and verse examples. Please tell me, schools, so we can engage. Send me a note, send me a text, send me an email.
Here.
We would like.
So I asked for data, and there is no data
Well, and we're tracking data, but it happens.
right now.
It happens.
So it's not a fair
And you saw
assumption.
it.
It's not a fair assumption to classify that every student removed in every situation cannot go back to a classroom, and we will not accept that. So as Brian proposed, we're willing to convene a committee to look at these individual types of situations and determine if there are classifications of behaviors that we should consider for this. But the wholesale agree to that, no.
That's the
So
last bullet. Yeah,
Well-
go ahead, and look at the last
well,
bullet.
I'm really struggling though here because I really, I need to, because the language that we currently have in our contract is very clear. And so I guess we could interpret the current language as currently duly ratified, legally binding in our contracts right now without that sentence, that then the kid couldn't come back until such a time that the student, teacher, and principal could resolve the situation. So inferring that if we're going to go that route with duly ratified language, how I'm reading that then is the student could not come back until the teacher, the student, and the principal or other authority appropriate to the situation could resolve the issue. And that's not going to happen in the middle of class because it's not fair to the 18, 20, 30, 40 other kids in that classroom for their learning to stop because one child decided that their rights superseded everybody else's rights. I'm really struggling with that. We're really struggling with that concept.
So we have a proposal there, and again, let's go back to the statute, because I still contend that the language of 10.4.2 tracks item 3 in the statute. And item 3 in the statute talks about a teacher may send a student to the principal's office and maintain effective discipline in the classroom and may recommend an appropriate consequence, i.e. referral. Otherwise. That's what that particular article talks about. And to your point, you're talking about the day or the period or otherwise. And I think we need to be very careful with respect to, I'm just tracking what the statute says. That a teacher may send them to the principal's office versus number 4, which says remove them from class. And you said, that's a different process. We don't disagree with that. But for every situation that's a referral or otherwise that they can't return that day, is the wholesale piece is a concern. Now, please look at the last bullet because I'm not closing the door slam shut. We want to remain open to continuing to meet because I'm aware of the students you're talking about. We're working, we're studying, we've got groups that are working behind the scenes that are trying, you're a part and aware of some of those where we're trying to work to mitigate where we can have positive behaviors of students and move them to places where they can receive, all the instruction and different ways to be managed that they need required. But it would be good for us to just continue to ferret that because I don't think every situation is they don't bring it back. It may be that they could continue and you do a referral or you send it later otherwise.
But this isn't every situation. Like we have specifically attached it to this existing piece of language because this isn't because Johnny looked at me wrong and I'm having a bad day and I'm sending Johnny out because he looked at me wrong. This is the child is disrupting the learning environment for every other child in that classroom. And I need somebody on your side to explain a situation where a student has exhibited behavior so extreme as to preclude the instructional process that it would be considered appropriate to return that same child the same day to the environment they just disrupted.
The pause is because I'm wanting to say something and I may just go ahead and say it. I think what I've observed and what I'm aware of is this. If we go down to the student review committee, the placement review committee process, you and I have been engaged in single teachers that are in self-contained rooms or have one place to service that student. And they will deny service to that student. And then we have to determine how we continue forward until the committee reviews the whole process. We go down through the statutory process. And it's pretty clear that then the committee decides, we agree with the teacher, they should be removed. And then we have to determine what do we do from there? Or they go back. And then if they go back, they disagree, there's an appeal process. Now take that process that's outlined in statute for removal of a student. And I have concern of a similar, it could be a situation that they just remove kids from the class by period or multiple times a week. And think about the instructional loss. Think about, all those pieces. So I think that's exactly what I wanted to say.
What about the instructional loss to every other child in that room that is dealing with disruptive behavior?
We understand.
And even in a separate ESE classroom, one child, I'm just gonna say it. It doesn't matter what exceptionalities or accommodations one child has. They do not have the right to hit staff or students. They do not have the right to disrupt every other child's learning environment because they have a disability. Then something else is going on, but that environment has been disrupted. And it doesn't matter if that is the only classroom on that campus that can serve that child. That child does not get to disrupt everybody else's learning. And we're not talking about permanent, because the placement review committee is for permanent removal. And so the way this reads to me in 10.4-3 is that if the placement review committee is convened, they could take up to 5 days, and that student per statute is removed from the classroom until the placement review committee decides the decision based on the evidence and the statements and all of the things that are presented to them. So I think we're struggling here because this is for temporary removal. That child decided to throw things or destroy a classroom, and maybe it's not warranted for permanent removal yet. But that teacher, those paras in the room, if that's applicable, and those kids cannot have that same child return to the classroom to continue disrupt the learning environment. The learning environment has already been disrupted once. That kid needs to go. And maybe if we started inconveniencing some parents to come pick up these disruptive kids for the day, however you guys want to deal with that, I don't understand the pushback here, because when we have the placement review committee, we are permanently removing the child from the roster. And that may not be what the teacher wants to do. They might just need to go for the day. And we're struggling to understand the position here. If we're in it for all children, we cannot have 98% of the kids in that class be doing what they're supposed to be doing and trying to learn. And then one kid gets to hijack the entire environment, because that is what's happening.
So let's do this. I've got a counter, so it's now on your side. We also have, as you put it in the record, duly ratified language. So we've got language that's in the contract that's it's there. And we're sitting here volleying back and forth counters on new language. So I'll leave it to your side for further review, and we'll go from there.
And before we move on, for the record, the way I'm hearing this, teachers that are listening, In cases when the disruptive effect of the student's behavior is so extreme as to preclude the instructional process, the teacher shall indicate on the referral the need to remove the child temporarily from the classroom until such a time as the student, teacher, and principal or other appropriate authority resolves the situation. Start writing your referrals that way, ladies and gentlemen, and asking for that kid to be removed until you get to sit down with your principal and that kid.
Or other authority.
If you would love to sit on there, that would be amazing.
Any number of individuals, they don't have to be part of that committee. And
We're not talking about the
where
placement review
breakdown
committee,
is,
Mr.
I
Hyde.
don't seem to understand, because I'm not gonna have the false narrative out there again, saying that we don't support teachers. The issue is, you've not defined what a disruptive behavior is. Is the kid snapping gum in the classroom?
No.
Tell me. Is the kid wearing too much cologne or perfume in the classroom?
No.
Is it, you haven't said that though. And that's
What
why
does
the
disruptive mean to you then, Mr. Hyde?
And disruption could mean anything, and that's why it
Disruptive
has to be a
behavior.
committee.
Disruptive,
Precludes the instructional.
disruptive behavior
You're
is
leaving
so
it up to
extreme as to
Michelle,
preclude the
you're leaving it up
instructional
to
process.
Individual interpretation, without any rules or parameters, you're leaving it open, so Wild West, we will not.
So does cologne,
There is a committee.
so extreme, so cologne would not fall under that. Because somebody's cologne is not a behavior that is so extreme to preclude the instructional
Mr.
process.
Davis.
I have,
Have we not had to deal?
we have work
with issues
cases
with employees
where
refusing
teachers
to
have
student access
refused
to
kids to
class
class because of
Because they're
their.
wearing too much deodorant or cologne.
True.
But that's why it's attached to this particular line of the contract. I agree, 100%. I get what you're saying, but an example, and I will say, thankfully, thank you to the principal who dealt with this. But I had one 2 weeks ago from Winston Academy. So if you want an actual school where a student was daily, several times a day, throwing things, getting supplies out of the cabinets, throwing them across the classroom, climbing on crates, jumping around up and down. When this behavior would start, they would call the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor would take the student for a walk around the campus and then bring them back to class. This particular student would then smile at the teacher, say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And when the guidance counselor walked out of the room, immediately go back and start taking things out. After weeks,
But see,
this
there's-
teacher did get help.
But that's the difference, right? So I'm not going to just openly accept that any disruptive effect created by a student will require the removal of that student for the entire day, because it leaves it up to individual determination. We will not do that. We will simply not support that. What we've offered is the ability to sit down, convene a committee, and go through specific scenarios that could be used to exclude students for us today. That is clearly written in our proposal. But to say wholesale, we're just going to allow students to be removed? Absolutely not.
So,
Because unfortunately, on my side of the house, I deal with far too many instances where people are not reading the IP, not adhering to the 504, not adhering to the BIP. And so they're putting the student in a position where he or she may act out of no fault of their own because they have a known disability, but there are strategies that are clearly identified to diminish those things and keep them from impeding the classroom. So this is an issue on both sides of the house here. So we're happy to explore this. I'm happy to revisit the language. I
Mhm.
simply won't do it the way it's defined right now.
So I do have a question though on your proposed language, because in statute, the placement review committee is for permanent removal. So is your counter put the placement review committee in another capacity?
Now, I'm gonna be clear, I moved it because I didn't feel the removal language, I felt it addressed more in the statutory provision of the permanent removal from class. That's why I moved it down. That was the differentiation between 3 and 4, which I read from the statute and the law. So, you know,
And it will
that,
require revision of the student code of conduct, which ultimately has to go before the board, which is why our committee needs to be far more explicit than what we're asking, the parameters we're going to establish. around this. We're not saying no to the concept. We're saying no to the current definition because it's not acceptable.
So
It's
then
too generic.
just before, because we're gonna go through all the proposals, but I think our team needs to have a clear understanding. What would you, if we were to list out specific disruptive behaviors? Because I think the current language is actually pretty descriptive to where the student's behavior is so extreme as to preclude the instructional process. So what would you define?
So I'm gonna be very candid. That's any classroom disruption. Anytime a child does anything in the classroom, it disrupts the learning. Whether it's for themselves or for every other child, there's a temporary disruption in learning. Even if the teacher has to pause momentarily to redirect the child.
But it says so extreme though. Extreme is
What
a,
we're asking is to define I am not comfortable with the current. Which is why we offered that we want to continue to meet to
Mhm.
identify those behaviors. If we can identify those, happy to make those recommendations for a change.
Mhm. So, and because I know we're concerned because the placement review committee has a very specific connotation and definition in statute. Because what the original intent of this language was for temporary removal, not permanent removal.
Understand.
And then when you bring in a placement review committee, you are asking for that child to be permanently removed, and that may not be what the teacher is asking for, because if the teacher was asking for that, they would go through 6.7-4.
And we weren't comfortable with a carte blanche removal for the day. Remember the discussion of the
Mhm.
elementary student, remember the discussion of the secondary, the block student.
Mhm.
Remember the discussion of not all schools have options for,
Mhm.
ISS or for a place for these students to land. Somebody's got to supervise them, all of those kinds of things. And as you think about behaviors and what may be exemplary, that would be so egregious to disrupt the instructional flow.
Mhm.
Start thinking of bigger buckets and then drill down from there. Is it a behavior? Is it a issue of special needs?
Mhm.
Start to kind of chunk them out and see where you end up.
I guess, and one more comment before we move on, because what we have are very small numbers of children. I mean, it's that are disrupting and hijacking the learning environment for everybody else. And it's making it impossible for the teacher to do their job. It's making it impossible for children that are in that room to see that behavior and continue to learn. And so we need a way to address that. And so if we have to come up with specific behaviors that would rise to this level of so extreme, because I'm sorry, if a kid is gonna tear apart my room and make my other children unsafe, that kid ain't coming back for the rest of the day. I will die on that hill. And I think a lot of our team and a lot of our teachers will die on that hill. And so,
That's why we're losing a lot of.
Let's be mindful of our rules
Yeah.
of bargaining. We don't speak from the gallery or otherwise. All right, thank you. All right, so we will, we'll move on to 3. And again, I'm not dismissing a lot of,
Mhm.
education discussion to be had here. So what I would appreciate is just take our counter, take it back and review it. And we will review and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we will move on to sick leave buyback. This is a counter. This is now 3 of 6. This is a counter for teacher appendix F. It was going to be a new para appendix I and a new ESP appendix F. We did quite a bit of change this. We looked out studying other school districts where similar programs were already in place. Tried to get some practice. And you're going to notice with this one, we took an attendance incentive priority on that. We know that attendance is key with instructional learning. We know that it also has a budgetary impact with respect to, the cost of subs being classrooms. So you'll notice that it is an attendance incentive. Teachers, parents, or ESPs would have to apply by May 31st annually to have the buyback option. And they would have the option to buy back up to 10 days. The buyback would be at 80%. That's not because we only want to give you
Statute.
80. It outlines it in the statute. Yes, ma'am, 1012.61.
Mhm.
And in a minute, we'll go through the language in more specific detail. I'll give you the Cliff Note version and we'll get into the details. So basically, if an employee has used 0 sick leave, that's perfect attendance for that year, they could buy back to all 10. They've had 1 sick leave day they've used, they could buy back 7. If they've had 2 sick days that they've used, they could buy back 5. In order to be eligible to do this, and I know you're gonna think of probationary folks and it may take folks a year or 2 to get to this place, but you have to have a minimum of 25 days accumulated sick leave remaining at the time you cash in. So if I'm got 0 absences and I'm cashing in 10, I need to have 35 days
Mhm.
booked, so I have 25 remaining. You could do the math, all versions of that, however that would work for whatever option that's in that chart. The days may be bought back only as full days. There's no 0.5s, no 0.25s, no hours or otherwise. And once this submission to say, I want to buy the days back is sent off and transmitted, it's a one-way street, doesn't come back. It's like a Chinese finger trap, but it's stuck, it won't come back. So may not cancel, request once submitted.
Mhm.
Must be active at time of submission and returning next school year. We thought that was important, we value your attendance and priority, so they want to honor that, so we're gonna pay that out, and we are looking for you to be returning next school year. And you can only submit one request per year. So once the attendance piece is verified, then you get to make that one request. This is a benefit that comes with almost a $500,000 price tag. So let's now look into the language so we can look at the details in here, because some of them we may need to ask some questions about to work our way through. I think item one, it was pretty clear with respect to what we just went through. Employees who utilize 2 sick leave days or less each school year and work the full school year shall, upon request by May 31st, receive payment for unused sick leave days. And you can see the breakdown that I've already summarized for us there. Stephanie,
Well,
thinking
so I have
of
a-
the school year.
I have a question real quick so in 1 and 2, are these two separate situations in which they can do sick leave buyback? One is an attendance bonus type thing, and the other is another way to do sick leave buyback?
They're all together.
Okay,
You're only eligible for the buyback if you meet these criteria.
okay.
So item 2, I want to go back to item 1, actually, where it says, they have to work the full school year. I think I would like, as you consider the parental piece and the sick leave buyback,
Mhm.
I'd like to be as, consistent with that discussion of the year of work and all that as we were before. So I won't rehash all that again, but my logic would be we keep everything the same as we can. So we don't confuse ourselves. So if we say a year is 1 year, as we discussed previously, that's where I would go with the interpretation of that as well. And we might need to be more specific about that. With an example, I don't like to put trivial examples in contract, but I think you see where I'm trying to get at.
Mhm.
Item number 2, the following procedures apply to the payment of sick leave under this section. An employee must have a minimum of 25 days of accumulated sick leave remaining after the payment for unused sick leave under this section. Item B, the payment of this incentive shall be paid to eligible employees not later or no later than the last paycheck in October 31st. I think we changed this, the last paycheck, October 31st of the following school year in which the employee qualified for the incentive pay. So think about that. A teacher finishes the school year in May, they've made their, they filled out their form, want to do the buyback. They will get their money by October 31st, will be the thought. We could go as late, we talked about this. I did May because that's when teachers leave. I talked to IT, we could do right up to June 31st, but I didn't want to get into teachers doing things when they're on leave, when they're not on contract, filling out forms and the like. I know I got 11s, I know I got 12-month ESPs, but you can just think about that for your consideration as you go back and think about it. But that was the logic why I went with May and not June. I was thinking about the groups that are on 10-month, so they wouldn't have to access or engage. And
Would it be, I have 2 questions, and they're probably for Heather or Jason. But question number 1, if they're applying for this in May, based on what you've presented, would we run into issues with it not being on that fiscal year and on the next fiscal year?
she's
My-
asking if
the
they're-
question-
if you were crossing fiscal years.
So like if they're applying for this leave at the end of May in one fiscal year, is there a problem with not paying it out in the fiscal year that they applied for it and it rolling into the next fiscal year?
But the plan is to get them paid before their.
June 30th.
Because the way this reads is they wouldn't be paid out until the end of October paycheck when they
Let me-
applied for it in May.
Let me say 2 things, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Pasco perhaps to chime in as well. I will say for Broward, this is the Broward model. They
Okay.
apply in May, they pay out in October.
Okay,
That's not a new fabrication.
okay,
We toyed with May application versus June
Okay.
30th. But there's also the discussion of they have to have 25 residual days. And I think if my memory serves me right, some folks are fronted 4 days at their
Mhm.
first contract day as well.
Yeah.
So beyond that, I'm open for whatever dates. I'm
Mhm.
very fluid on the dates. So
So
Ms.
there-
Pasco, do you want to remark?
Sure, there was a couple concerns. One, when you're talking about the teacher contract, June, July, and the first check in August, and I'm going by memory, are all holdback checks. They
Mhm.
aren't checks where you earned it.
Mhm.
Secondly, crossing over from June to July is the end of our fiscal year. So the payroll department, the finance department, and Heather can speak more to it, are slammed trying to get everything done to get retirement and everything else done. And it's just a real
Mhm.
concern, which is also why Broward did this.
Mhm.
They push it back because it's just trying to get all of that work done at the same time and not creating frustration.
And we're not necessarily, I'm not saying that we're opposed to the October, because I think that, and even Jason had made the comment at the last meeting about doing it closer to the holidays, and we thought that that was a good idea.
Problem with the holiday pay, because we can address that. Because you have to maintain the 25 days, you do it mid-year, there's nothing to ensure that they maintain those 25 days after that.
mhm.
And then again, it's just a payroll processing issue. Is it your interest that if this were to go through, or, yeah, is the PEA's interest to have it paid out before the end of the fiscal year?
No, I just asked that question because I know that tends to be one of the hangups that we have. And so that's why our original language was to pay out at the end of the fiscal year. Because we were thinking that that would actually be easier
Right.
because you guys are trying to close things out.
Is that your interest?
No, not necessarily. We're open to different payout deadlines, and times.
Because the payout, the implications for taxes, it's gonna be during the fiscal year in which it's paid,
Mhm,
not in which they submitted their request.
yeah,
So that answers that part, but I'm just saying, if you wanted it done before that June 30th, July
Yeah.
1st rollover, we're gonna have to move
Yeah.
that date up pretty considerably to get submission and the processing done. And
Mhm.
that's again, assuming we could do that on top of everything else.
I mean, we were open to, because I think we really liked Jason's suggestion of getting it closer to like holiday time for people to have this option.
So is there a difference Dan, between? So if they applied by April or May, what was the date right now?
Right now, it says no later than October 31st.
No, but the application.
Oh, the application is May 30th.
Mhm.
So if we submit by May 31st, but we commit to paying it out by December,
That's fine.
is that your?
No,
preference? For-
October's, we're not, I just wanted to seek to understand about the fiscal year. That was what that question was.
And so
Okay,
I was just doing a shoulder conversation with Jason. I think it's just a rolling payout because once the application is made from then on, you just pay out in the fiscal year,
okay.
on a go forward basis for whatever year it's in. And so,
And, okay, and then our,
see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
in the
I got you.
Fiscal year, the payout occurs, but it'd be looking back for attendance and all that kind of thing.
so when you guys were looking at cost outs based on what we had originally proposed and what you guys have countered, how many people have more than 10 days worth of accumulated leave and how many people have 25 or more? When you were looking at costing this out?
Why don't we make a note of that?
Okay,
And then we'll get that communicated back to you, either
Okay.
tonight or as soon as we can when we get back.
okay.
Because we did work mock-ups and full data. so
Okay.
We'll work on trying to get that to you.
Yeah, because because that was one of our questions, because our original language was you had to at least keep 10 days worth of time. And then you could, do up to 10 of that. So really you couldn't cash out more than 10 days.
And can you qualify what your data request was?
So the request is from our original language, how many people under our contracts have more than 10 days of leave? And then based on, because you said there was $500,000 of exposure on your counter, I'm assuming that that's based on the number of people that have 25 days or more. People have 25 days or more leave accumulated in our contracts.
So you want 10 and you want 25.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And the number of people under the PEA contracts that have more than 10 for our proposal and then more than 25 for your proposal.
Well,
Because you got $500,000 of exposure. So that would have been from the 25 days or more, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we would have to caucus on that
Okay.
and come back.
Do you want to go through the rest of yours? Because we're gonna have to caucus too.
Because you're gonna have more to talk about when we're
Yeah.
talking 6. because I have some concerns with the way your question or requested that data, so I want to make sure I clearly understand it,
Yeah.
so. 10 days or more,
And
How
then
many
25
people?
days or more.
but the 10 days or more, see, your proposal was with 10.98. Our proposal was at 10.75.
Mhm.
That's a different cost out, so I
I,
need to be very clear.
we're
I
talking,
can give you a number. of
Just
people that
the
have
number
this
of people
many.
that would be eligible.
no, under our proposal, how many people would be eligible because they have more than 10
We can do
days?
the
Well,
eligibility
you
piece,
have to-
versus
because I
all
thought you
for
said cost
25.
out.
Well, I guess where I was getting at is because you said it was a $500,000 exposure, so
Correct.
you use something to cost that out, so I'm assuming you use.
That based
So
on
that
the
is-
threshold of
that's the
days.
That is the number of individuals who have 25
Yeah.
or more days and have additional leave that they can cash
Mm.
in. Whether that's 5 days, 10 days.
Mhm.
That's the exposure, and that's the 10 days. That's why I think we can caucus, but I'd rather we provide you data for 10, 15, 20, and
Okay.
25.
Okay,
Because I will tell you, your 10 number is not a 10.
okay,
Because we know those numbers based off your allowance, based off your initial proposal. That is not a fiscal exposure we can maintain year after year.
Yeah.
Um,
well, can you, then we would like, if you
yeah,
can
we'll
provide
give you
that.
The breakdown of
Yeah.
every,
Okay.
in 5-day increments, so that
Okay.
we can have a conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had already hit everything in the PowerPoint. The one last thing I think I want to be very clear on is, letter F. We said the 80% was going to track the statute, and I want to be clear that would be minus applicable taxes, just in accordance. It's not just
Yeah.
80%. And I also want to be clear in letter F that it reads as follows, that it's 80% of the hours worked per day based on the work schedule rule for their position as of June 30th. And that language tracks,
Mhm.
we can pull out the
Yeah,
system.
yeah,
All right,
yeah, all of that makes sense.
we'll go to number 4, that's 6. This was the school surveys language
Mhm.
that you presented last time, specifically new language, I guess, Article 4.15 with supervisor feedback. You can see there, we're rejecting that particular 4, Paragraph 4 and ES 5. I'm gonna spend a few minutes just already going down through what I know you know is in the contract already. We already have an opportunity with Article 6.7 with school-based committees. We worked hard on that language a few sessions back with respect to the priority and the purpose and what those committees would do. We placed a lot of value in them. So again, in order to provide an efficient school operation and climate of collaboration, certain school-based committees were established. We talked about Labor Management Committee. That committee discusses issues, concerns, suggestions, and ideas related to work site, the faculty and the staff, and promote a better understanding between the association and work staff. We have multiple opportunities of communication to speak with administration, members of the work site. We have an opportunity to meet and address issues and concerns of staff with the principal. We have the communication of bulletin boards in the mailboxes. So we'll continue on here. We want to remain receptive to discuss concerns that are at the schools. We're not like an ostrich putting our head in the sand, so we're very open to continue to discuss what those concerns are. I also know, Stephanie, that you guys already do surveys. You know, you have specific schools at times that you will target and generate a survey. When those surveys are provided, those questions are to be provided back to us as well as the data. We want to know how many, when those surveys go out, we have a big interest in how many completed the survey, how many came back, and what the results showed. The last bullet there talks about the district reserves the right to survey and establish efficacy values for a number of responses. Because I believe that if you're surveying a whole staff and you're only getting a group of 35 back and it's a staff of 150, there's not efficacy in that response. I think if we talk about a threshold of 80 to 90%, then we're going to really start to see what the overarching group of staff at that school are feeling. We know that at some of our staffs, at some of our schools, we have staff that they can be folks that draw in, issues and attention, and they might not reflect the whole staff at the school. So I want to be mindful of that and how survey results will be used as we continue to remain open to hearing what those concerns are. But I'm rejecting it because I think there's already language in place with committees and ways for those to occur, and there's already past practice in place with respect to the surveys that you're already doing as well.
So a few things. We're a data-driven profession. We all know this. We all talk about data, even in your roles and our roles and teachers, peers, we're all looking at data. Okay. So if I give a test and a vast majority of my children fail that test, it is my responsibility to be very self-reflective in my practice and what maybe I did or didn't do to see what went wrong and then remediate and teach all the stuff. And so I think that reflection and that self-reflection and that continuous improvement is important for our principals and our supervisors in our schools as well. And this is something that doesn't have a price tag that would actually mean quite a lot to our rank and file people that are in our schools every day making this work. And so knowing that staff morale and staff turnover are always in drastic need of continuous improvement. In our data-driven profession, do you not feel that staff feedback is a vital and valuable piece of data to help administrators and supervisors grow in their role as a leader?
I value the data collection. I value the process. I'm going to direct us back to what I already have put on the screens in front of you. I'm very mindful of how the survey results are used. I'm very mindful of not just how they're given, but where they're given, when they're given. And I'm not confident that I always have an opportunity to give input to the survey questions before they go out. Many times I get a communication that says the survey went out, and I hear about it after the fact, because I believe that if we're being completely collaborative, that needs to be a discussion we have before it goes out. Because
Well, and we
sometimes
only do.
you'll survey membership separate and apart from whole school. Okay, I believe if I've got that right.
Not
You
usually.
survey-
No, not with climate surveys.
but-
Never.
Because I get, I have concerns.
Mm.
And
Well,
and I
and-
can speak with specificity because many times the schools that I'm talking about are schools that you're hearing from members on.
Mhm.
And I will be direct. It might not be 50 or 60 people at that school. I can think of an elementary school right now where I dealt with Wilfredo and a teacher, that teacher talked to another teacher, and we had two hot teachers that were impacting a whole group of staff at that school. That's the basis of my concern.
Well, and we will push back on that because we do maybe 1 to 3 climate surveys a year. And they are the same questions every year and they go out to the entire school.
So
And we are very collaborative.
That for all schools or is for that targeted schools?
If we get 5, 6, 7 complaints from different people, we start asking questions.
Okay.
We will start doing more targeted school visits. My service unit directors will go out and do after school meetings. We start to meet, trying to do labor management with the principal,
Right.
which if we're gonna go this way, then maybe labor management should be required.
And
Because
I
it's
do-
not currently required. It's a recommendation, but we do a lot of groundwork before we actually put out a climate survey. And that climate survey goes out to every single person covered under our contracts at that school. And then we usually get between 70 and 80% participation. And we work very collaboratively with the Division of Schools. And I know Tracy's not here tonight, but even prior to Mr. Green being in that spot, we worked very collaboratively with the regionals. I know Talay sat in some of those meetings, and we are bringing legitimate concerns. So as climate surveys don't go out from our office willy-nilly, what we're asking, and we would love to talk about frequency. If 4 is too much, we were thinking maybe at end of the first 9 weeks, kind of do a check-in with staff and then do another one in the third 9 weeks. But this would be, and we don't even want the data unless we are concerned about a school that might be, this is truly for staff to be able to give feedback to your school-based administrators to say, hey, communication's great, Principal A, or hey, we're not feeling like we're being communicated with. This might need to change. And we're not even asking for those results, for them to be mandatorily given to us every single time. We want a way, and when I say we, it's not Stephanie Yoakum asking for this. Everybody that we represent wants this because they want an avenue to be able to say, with anonymity sometimes, because there is a power dynamic between your supervisor and a subordinate. There is. And so there are people that do not feel comfortable going to their principal and saying things that they feel are problems. And that's just the fact of teachers. We are a different breed. A lot of us don't like conflict. You are dealing with probably the people here that do like conflict. Well, I wouldn't say like conflict. I'm good with confrontation if it needs to be confronted. But there are a vast majority of teachers that don't want that, but they still want to be able to provide input to their supervisor. And I don't understand where the pushback is on that.
So again, the first bullet, we remain receptive to those discussions. I want to be mindful of a management right with respect to the principals and the leadership we have at the schools that are our leadership staff, not your PEA representative groups. I want to also go back to the example that I spoke to with the elementary school. We were quite successful, and I will be open and transparent as I was a little bit anxious about leaning into the labor management committee process. Because I wasn't quite sure that it was truly open discussions. It was very collaborative. And I think if Wilfredo was here, we both say we did some good work, being able to come to the table and have open conversations with those targeted staff that are on those committees. And I will say that even within the school, in that particular situation, we had to be so specific that some of the folks, if they weren't listed to be on a committee, they couldn't insert themselves because some of these folks are so passionate about what they're doing. It can get problematic. Those are my concerns. So we'll leave it at that. And then you can review. Well, I guess we've rejected it. I will contend that it's a management right and we have language that's there. This was not a counter, this was a rejection.
Well, but even as a management right, if you feel that it's a management right, as most of you are supervisors in some form or another, wouldn't you want feedback from your insubordinates to see if what's working is working and what's not working is not working? I mean, I really am struggling here because this is a no cost to you. And this would actually, I think, boost morale based on what we have heard and experienced. And so I'm really struggling with this rejection because I feel that it's a morale booster and it doesn't cost you anything.
Thank you. We'll move on to air conditioning. This was 5 of 6. And again, air conditioning, you have language you proposed with respect to thermostat temperature will remain under the control of the assigned instructional staff in each individual classroom area. We are rejecting this offer, and I will begin by saying we are continually working on this process. We're reviewing it. We continue to be open to doing what we can to mitigate any increased risks of mold in our schools. I want to go back and begin at the first bullet though. Let's talk about the fact that we maintain heating and air conditioning equipment. We're available to provide a comfortable, healthy environment when school is in session, except in emergency situations. We're in compliance with that. We've worked through lots of challenges several years ago with respect to the AEC class action. We're working hard with plans to replace and repair. We've got mechanisms we put in place with school starting and otherwise to make sure our units are functional and working. We've also shared engineering reports that demonstrate best practice set points. We've talked about moisture and what happens with that. The ceiling tiles, how they get wet and they become discolored, and the mold concerns that the engineering reports provide to us. Another factor that we didn't talk about last time when you presented was just the increased cost of utilities, the retrofitting to mitigate those increased risks that we're talking about. And again, I'll repeat, we continue to evaluate options of changing thermostat set points to mitigate that risk. We're gonna follow the data, we're gonna follow the engineering reports and not have our schools become challenges with mold because we're changing the recommended engineering set points for temperatures in our rooms. The third bullet, the proposal spoke to individual assigned instructional staff control for each individual classroom. Some AC systems aren't even presently designed for that because some of them are whole wings or multiple rooms at a time. That would be an impossibility to even have that discussion. And the employer retains all rights to manage the operations of our physical plants. And as I said when I began, I'm believing we're in compliance with CBA and maintaining and keeping our units functioning as we're directed to do in that article. And the last one is 6 of 6 with respect to. Hold on. Yep.
So keep in mind, my comments from our last session still stand.
Mhm.
We're exploring various options, but we can't just willy-nilly expose ourselves to litigation. Because if we end up with airborne pathogens or other issues, we just simply can't do that. And since it's a known condition, I definitely can't expose the district intentionally. So we are working with an environmental studies company to determine if there's a way, if we were to turn down the biggest issue for us, you've never noticed in the school, if you want to pop up a ceiling tile, please don't stand on a table or a chair. Have a custodian bring a ladder. You're welcome to poke your head up above the ceiling tiles. Our ducts are not insulated. They are just metallic ducts. As a result, we get a lot of condensation if the air temperatures go down below a certain set point. That's what the engineering studies were about. And it's why it very clearly states that. So if we can find alternatives to make, not to find an opportunity to do that, happy to do so, as we shared last time. The other thing is, please keep in mind that we will not get a final report back as far as high school and middle school HVAC replacements until January, early February. I believe I shared that at our last meeting as well. So this is just a topic I think that's going to have to persist for a little while longer, so we can look for alternatives in some of our classrooms. But I think, as you've acknowledged, Ms. Yocum, there were far fewer complaints this year. The ones that are complaints right now are not because temperatures are not appropriate, because when we temp the air coming out of the vents, definitely at the right set points, actually well below 72 degrees. But in those instances, we brought in portable chillers, we brought in additional things to help improve the comfort level for those employees, not because the classroom is not acceptable. But we will continue to do that until we find a discernible solution for the long term. Really, what we have to do is replace our units in all of our high schools and go back to chiller units. And so that's what's being finalized right now. And then that will become part of the half-penny sales tax proposal where our expenditures will go. The other expenditure, we may have to borrow to address those capital issues. But again, we can find an opportunity, just reminding for people in the room who may not have heard this last time, and those who may be listening. If there's an opportunity that the environmental company says, Mr. Hyde, if you inspect those ducts a minimum of twice a year, then yes, you might be able to drop your set points without risk of exposing people to mold, mildew, and other things. Then we can explore that at that time. So we'll be happy to share all those studies with you. So it's not a flat rejection. We're working on something.
I mean, because, and this is something that we've talked about too, but I do feel like we need to say it here, because the feeling of a lot of people is that they're entrusted with children every day. And a lot of these teachers are also expected to, protect kids in an active shooter drill, active shooter situations. God forbid that something even comes here, and they feel like they can't be trusted to control their air. And so that is a feeling amongst staff, is that they feel like they're entrusted to protect children, but they're not entrusted to control their learning environments.
I think
AC. And so I wanted to put that out there, because that is the perception of a lot of people. And so I hope we continue to work on the AC issues and use that half-penny sales tax, but we're gonna, it is what it is at this point, but.
as you know, surrounding districts, some of them are set at 74, not at 72.
And Stephanie, with respect to the entrusting, I want to be mindful. There is a group of folks out there, I'm not stereotyping, but there's a group of people that aren't trustworthy with our equipment. And we saw that when we got into our class action agreements. We saw folks that were using heat lamps. We saw folks that were defacing, pulling the whole thermostat off the wall. We saw folks that if they know somebody on campus that can reprogram the thermostat, they have to come and reprogram the thermostat. And we spend a lot of time, money and resources sending our guys out to repair, replace, or reprogram thermostats that these teachers have tried to alter. So I want to also be mindful and put that on the record that that's also a concern we have as well, because those are resources that cost money. Not just the physical resource, but the time of our facilities guys to work on those. We'll move to the last one, which is substituting. 6 of 6. This was teacher article 8. This is a rejection. This is one where I try to understand, why you submitted it, your team. But as I try, I want to have an opportunity to have you think about some things that perhaps you're aware of, perhaps you're not, and appeal to the fact that we're all supporting our schools. What was proposed is a management right with respect to the team that's at the central office or otherwise. And it seemed to lack an acknowledgement of what district staff are already doing to support schools. It was almost like, we love this one, we need you in the school 4 more days a year. And it didn't seem to acknowledge the fact that staff are already giving more than the 4 days. You're just not seeing it or acknowledging it. We have staff that volunteer every year for 3 days at schools. Mr. Hyde, he commissions us out and requests staff to go out and be there to support schools, to help kindergartners open lunch, to open milk in the lunchroom, to help, at car duty in the morning or the afternoon, plugging in during the day, wherever duties need to be had, or just those kids being new on campus, teachers needing extra help. We're there. All of our central office staff is there helping. You don't see a group that's there volunteering for graduations. I thought about the teachers that are there celebrating and the staff that come. But there's another group of people that are there for over a week. And we do it not just for one school, but we're there for periods of time from in the afternoon to when the last graduations had that night. And that's never seen because that group that's there for that school and that group of kids leaves. And it's not recognized or maybe thought of. You don't see the group of people that are behind the scenes taking kids to count for big brothers and big sisters, giving time, giving resources, meeting with them. Walked into Apple a Day Cafe the other day, and there was a group of people meeting with their munchkins, their students, getting to know one another. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but bonding goes on at schools as much as twice a month across our districts. We've talked about this with respect to we need help with bonding. There's over 215 people that are deployed to go do bonding exercises, to keep schools functional, to keep them safe, to keep students safe, to keep staff safe. We don't talk about that. We don't come to you, but it's not acknowledged. But yet it's just kind of put across the table. We want to see more of you. We want 4 more days of you. And we are there, and we are there supporting our schools. So I'm asking that we all just be respectful, that district staff play a role to help schools function without disruption. Our job is done if there's no disruption. If people get paid, if people get onboarded, if all of the technology is in place, the lessons are in place, the buildings are cool, the lights are on, the commodes are working, we all work together. So I'm asking, we're rejecting, but I'm just asking for some consideration and to be respectful of what we do out in schools, all of us as a team, to support our kids, because we are students first. So that was the substituting rejection.
So based on when we costed it out, determining if it was just district staff or district staff plus school-based administration. By going in 4 times a year into a classroom, while we can recognize those things that happen, but those are also maybe outside of the wanding. Those are like the happy things. Like, I think it's different when you're seeing something that happens day to day. Especially if you haven't really been in a classroom for a long period of time, or maybe depending on your job, ever, right? So what we were looking at is it would save this district between $100,000 and $200,000 a year based on the day rate for a sub at about $150, which isn't a lot, but every penny counts in the budget projections that we're looking at. And knowing that your budget projections are not that great right now, unless the legislature comes back this session and decides to actually do the right thing. Why would you be opposed to doing this and seeing what an actual classroom is like?
I'm gonna offer back to the first bullet, it's a management right. These are central office staff directed under the superintendent. I'm also going to offer the fact that you see 4 days of savings. I respect the workload of teachers. We have forums committees, we talk about how many kids are in classrooms. We talk about hours that they work and they plan at home. So what happens when you take perhaps one of us out? Guess what happens? We've got to make up for that work after the fact when we go home. Because somebody's wondering if somebody can return from leave. Or what happens with paid administrative leave. I give this letter to somebody what's happening today. Or, we could make up all kinds of scenarios and situations. And so that's a part of our issue. That's a part of the respect issue. It's give us 4 more days, but yet I'm asking you to be mindful of the work doesn't get done to keep things flowing in a way that doesn't disrupt what goes on with the operations of school. We need our people, just like we need them in teachers in classrooms. We need our staff to continue to process and do what their job functions are every day to keep things flowing efficiently. And I think that's important. So if there are no other.
Hold on.
It's a ring.
Yeah. Don't you feel that getting firsthand experience in how classrooms actually are functioning today would be a valuable piece of data and a perspective for you and your other supervisors to have when you're making overarching decisions that impact some of these classrooms? I think that's where we're coming from. And I know that's where we're coming from. Because, and I'll use site-based budgeting as an example, because that's something that we were very concerned about. The first year that it rolled out, there weren't very many schools. We didn't really know a lot about it. And then we started learning more and more. We're finding that smaller schools are trying to use a guidance counselor, a school counselor to also be the testing coordinator, or using the school counselor to also be ISS, because they don't have the funds because of the way things are allocated now. And that's just one example. And so we feel that whether it's 4 or 2 or 1, getting some experience in a classroom today, and I did it, and I continue to plan on doing it. Going into, and my days just looks just like yours, because the work that doesn't get done during the day, guess what happens? It gets done when Jackson goes to bed. And so I understand that, but I was in a high school separate class last year, subbing in May. And I plan on drawing another name out of people that have recruited people to go into another classroom. And I feel that when we do that, we get the experience of what people are dealing with on the ground. And so maybe the language when we're talking about getting a kid removed because they've disrupted the learning environment so much, that you as a supervisor at a level that you haven't been in the classroom for a long time or ever, depending on your job, that you would then understand what is happening on the ground every day. And so you might be more hesitant to put somebody on paid admin leave for an improper CPI hold when you've actually experienced what it's like to have a kid come at you and you're making a decision in a split second. Like, that's where this is coming from. And so, and again, this doesn't cost you any money. It actually saves you money. And I get that. But I continue and will continue to go into classrooms and sub at least once a quarter. Because it's what keeps you connected to the actual work.
All right. We'll move on next to the salary counter proposal. And actually, we don't have handouts here because it's all going to be on the presentation. The first thing I want to get on the record is, before we proceed any further, we spoke about it last time we were together. And whether it's now on the record off the cuff or whether it's thoughtful and you bring it back later, I would like to request a formal proposal or a position from TEA regarding shortfall to the federal migrant ESOL and PD budgets. Because we do have 139 positions that we're tracking, that we're concerned about. Because if the funding goes away, we anticipate that that's going to expire, it will go away. What will happen to those positions? Because those positions cost money. And they are people with, that you represent, they're people with mortgages and priorities and car payments and families. So it's important for us to know where your position is, because for us, that's a group of people that we are evaluating and we anticipate to remain committed to. The second bullet, PEA acknowledged, it was in our first meeting, I believe, that there's
no new money.
And we have reviewed your budgets and monies, and you came to that conclusion that there was, I'll qualify, no new money. We have talked in these sessions that the district is reviewing, and we continue to review vendor contracts as previously discussed. It is something that is an ongoing process and continues to occur behind the scenes. And we know that we are here, and just with what you just said, no new money, we are here in a very thin, difficult funding event. So absent a referendum, the district is offering our best offer of 1% for all teachers, paraeducators, and ESP. That's an estimated cost of 5.1 million. And we did talk about the 3.4 million TISA. We know that we're in a situation with respect to that. But we also know that we committed to bargain and come ahead as best we could in good faith. And so the TISA with respect to that value and 1.7 in addition brings us to 5.1. How does this all look and how do we get here? How do the numbers look? Took numbers from the chart you presented to us last time. So the numbers should crosswalk. We followed along on your chart as we go through here. We had said that the cost of the 25-26 staff with benefits, and I continue to use the same numbers that you used, the 8,738 staff, was 671,366. Then I have the next row, the column that shows that cost, again, duplicated, the 511,671,366. We continue to have vacancies posted for teachers and paras that we have to provide coverage, for our students and the vacancies we have. So that brings the exposure to 540,231,630. When you presented the 2.5% proposal on the value of 8,738 staff, your chart showed 524,463,150. The 1% for the same amount of staff, 8,738, is $516,788,080. So the difference between the 1% salary proposal and the cost of the 25-26 total staff with benefits, again, based on 8,738 people, is $5,116,714. In the last column, you can see the district salary proposal is 1% for all teachers, paraeducators, and ESP. We're proposing a flat percentage payout across all pay scale areas and groups. And pending ratification or pending that we're able to move farther or forward, raises would be processed by December 1st. I broke the numbers down again, had 3.4 million for TISA, 1.7 million for a total of 5.1 million. And
Go back to the other slide, please.
yeah, this one here, the one before.
No, right there.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question. So on your fourth column where you have the $5,116,714.
Yeah,
So that is the budgeted difference between a 1%. And that would be the cost of the district, but you're also, so I guess what I'm looking at, I want clarification on.
Mhm.
Because technically, the district's is only wanting to put in $1.7 million. Because the 3.4 million is state money. And
that
so my question is, looking at the numbers at the very bottom, it looks like you would have 5.1 million of your money plus 3.4 million of the state money. And so are you trying to only put in 1.7 of your own money plus the state money? Can you explain that?
and
Okay,
if you might want to,
yes,
how about if we just put that in a parking lot for maybe 2 more
Okay.
slides?
okay,
And if I don't answer it, we'll come back to it.
okay.
I wanted to bring this slide back again because I felt it was important. I know the numbers aren't the 8,738, but these were the old numbers, and it's important because I want to demonstrate that while we're looking at cost, we talk about numbers with benefits, and you talk about the 22.2% for FRS, Social Security, Workers' Comp. But I want to also remind everybody, the district has additional incurred costs with health, with our HCAs, our clinics, and with life insurance. So we have to add those values in as we continue to discuss. And this was the slide where I thought it may answer your question. So the district summary. We continue to review vendor contracts and all funding sources while we operate as efficiently as possible. We've sharpened our pencils. We've done as best we can to get to this place where we have the 1% to bring to you this evening. We prioritize employee benefits in the time of the funding challenges, because when the money is tight, we look at different things we could do that brings a benefit.
Mhm.
We've talked tonight about sick leave buyback. We've talked about the parental leave. We've talked about different things that have monetary value and exposure for us that I want to be on the record shows that we value employees. So you have $1 million exposure on paid parental leave. You have 500,000 on the sick leave buyback. And you do have 5.1 million on the salaries that we're talking about. We do know that the 3.4 on the TISA was the first run that we had. It was the only money that we put on the table. We didn't have it anymore. And so as I'm circling back around, we've continued to just be as efficient and review all of the contracts and resources we have to get to where we are tonight. So when you add those all up, you have $6.6 million that we're working to put in front of you with respect to real money and or benefits. That's all I have.
A few comments before we caucus, because we're getting to the point where we're gonna be caucusing. Before I get into some of the math that Kat just did. When you guys are starting to put together budgets for the next year, right? As you're starting to construct those probably in the spring, looking at what we're using now versus as you're starting to build your budget for the next fiscal year. What's your process for looking at raises for employees? Like, how do you budget that?
We start the budget process. We're actually getting ready to start the budget process for next year now. We officially begin it in January. We look at the funding that's coming in from the state. We look at the expected FTE. It's based off of Survey 2 during February. Later on, we get our additional data. It comes in. We look at our a trend of the last 5 years, what our expenses have been. We have the site-based budget now that JD could speak more to, but those funds go to the schools based on the FTE that's earned by the schools, and then they hire their staff from that piece. So when we look at raises, there are some years if we have budgeted for every expense that we have to budget for, and there are funds left over, that's the pot that we would take to Mr. Hyde and say, this is available. And then we go from there.
So just so I am hearing it correctly, and please correct me if I'm not correct. Everything else gets budgeted. And then we see what's left over for raises.
So first we start with the FTE, and that amount is allocated to the schools. Then we look at all fixed costs, for example, utilities, costs that are fixed and continuous. We look at those. Our staff is between 60 and 80% of our budget. It is the majority of it. So yes, everything is budgeted, but everything primarily constitutes our staff.
Now that we haven't had ESSER for 2 years, which line item, how are we paying for programs like Varsity Tutors? Which line item's coming in? Is that coming out of?
So that's currently coming from another grant.
Which grant?
Federal grant. I'm not sure if the exact acronyms, I think it's, I'll have to get it for you.
Okay.
We've just recently did that.
Comes out of contract, so it's a line item that comes on there
Okay.
to answer your question.
So when I'm doing a budget, and I know that it's a bigger scale, I know that my property tax or my property insurance mainly is going to go up probably every year, and I have to budget for that up front. So when we look at staff raises, the feeling is, and I think it's kind of confirmed, even though I don't think it's a malicious intent to confirm, we know that we should be budgeting for increases every year. And other things might have to fall away, like programs or things like that. If we're not spending the materials and supplies, for textbook adoption, textbooks don't work if there's no teachers to teach the textbook and curriculum. But I have to budget first for my mortgage, right? And with that comes the escrow, whether it's increased property taxes or increased escrow for my property insurance. And so staff are your mortgage, because if you don't have your staff, we are the ones driving this vehicle as far as educating children. And so it's concerning that when we're looking at regular cost of living increases, that those aren't budgeted up front for the board to look at and say, well, we know that cost of living or inflation's at 2.9. Like, we're not even keeping up with inflation. And so that's a problem, because a 1% for a paraeducator who is making $21,469 is $17 a month. That doesn't fill up most people's cars, and an ESP who is making $30,000 is going to see $25 a month, and a teacher is seeing about $40 a month. Like, there's a disconnect between budgeting for meaningful cost of living increases and the way this budget process is happening. And so do you think that a 1% increase fulfills the board's second goal in their strategic plan to not only recruit, but retain high qualified teachers and staff? Do you think a 1% increase starts getting to the board's strategic plan goal of goal 2, to recruit and retain high quality teachers and staff?
I'd like to address your disconnect in budgeting. It is our highest desire to pay our staff as much as possibly can. It is our goal to give them increases every year. Unfortunately, our funding is not adequate to do that. So even though it is the desire to do that, we do have utility bills to pay. We have looked at programming, which is where we were able to find the dollars last year to give the additional funds that we gave. If you look back, as Mr. Warren, and as you have stated, it was not additional funding. It was not added funding. They were programs that we reviewed and we cut. So based on that, it's very important that our staff is our priority. And our budget process is very sound and it's very meticulous.
So you've got we've gone through the 6 proposals and you've got the 1% counter to your 2.5. So it's probably time for us to, I'm gonna ask you, are we done for tonight or do you want to go to caucus? and
Well,
come back?
we do want to caucus and come back. Because we have some things to talk about as a team and would like to caucus and come back. I do want to ask the question one more time. Do you think the 1% proposed increase fulfills the board's second goal in their strategic plan to not only recruit but retain highly qualified teachers and staff?
In the absence of additional dollars, yes. Which you've accomplished. So while you use the example of paying the mortgage first, we do that every year. We budget to cover our existing staff every single year. And then we have to pay everything else. And then it's only then that we can address additional compensation. And that's dependent on a number of factors, existing costs, existing priorities, state funding, lack of state funding. After Mr. Warren posed the question to you, I want to hear on the record what PDA proposes we do with 139 potential employees that'll lose their jobs
So we'll be caucusing.
because of federal funding. Because it's not fair to assume that the district will find $18 million to cover those positions.
But we also
As much
have
as we would like
300 subs plus and 260
You're
vacancies.
assuming every one of those people would like to go back to the classroom or have the certification to do so. You're also failing to acknowledge the fact that all the programs and specific student groups that are adequately served by those, including teachers who may not have all the training and knowledge to adequately support those students, migrant ESOL, are now going to go without. You have a PD department that can no longer provide professional development. So all these teachers that we need to have, based off current state statutes and requirements for them to have reading endorsements and other certifications, don't know how we're going to do that.
So how is the board going to address legislative platforms to aggressively?
That's a federal policy.
Well, but we have congressional
All due
people.
respect, I've not seen PEA sign up to a single state board of education meeting to speak their piece. Stop.
They don't let us talk in a state board.
Sign up for public participation like everyone else.
You've been to those meetings? You know what that's like. Okay.
Everyone else.
Yeah, they don't allow public
That's the point you're
comment.
making about the board. This board has been incredibly gracious. They've worked very hard. They work diligently. They establish legislative platform. They advocate on a daily basis. So it's not fair to pass that burden or deflect that responsibility solely on the board.
All right, I think we're ready to caucus.
Anna, are we good? All right. Stephanie.
All right, okay. All right, so we are not prepared to accept or reject anything tonight. We're gonna take this back. We do have one date on the books for November 19th. And so we'll be prepared for counters on the 19th. We do have some questions though, and what we'll do, we want to say them here, but we'll also email them to you so that you have a list of questions. In addition to the sick leave buyback questions that we already had, but we'll include those in the email tomorrow as well. So we would like a list of any soon to expire programs or contracts, and particularly noted ones that are paid out of the general fund. What are you projecting to spend on materials and supplies this year? I know we have like the district summary budget, but realistically, like we know that CTE is doing some textbook adoptions that might be coming out of that. Some other items that might be coming out of materials and supplies. Things like that, but we'll have that written down. Sorry, I'm trying to read it. A list of expenses that are paid out of the general fund that are not salaries and benefits. And that are not eventually picked up through like capital or capital transfer. Or grants. So anything that's truly paid out of the general fund that's not salary and benefit. And then how many new non-school-based positions have been created in the last 5 years? In addition to the sick leave buyback questions we had earlier. And I also wanted to put on the record, because we've been getting questions about, well, what does this impasse mean? Today, PEA filed an unfair labor practice charge against the impasse declaration. And so I wanted to put that on the record and make our folks aware, because we're going to be sending out communication later this week on that. And so with the impasse declaration, because it was just on the teacher salary increase allocation funds, we feel that that violated by bifurcating the TSIA from other funds. We know that the district management side disagrees with that. But we feel we have a pretty strong basis in law that would say otherwise. And so I wanted to just read a few parts of the unfair labor practice so that our folks understand what's going on. So we believe that the school district has committed an unfair labor practice in violation of Florida statute 447.501 1A and C by declaring impasse solely over one subject of bargaining, the TSIA fund distribution, by declaring impasse prematurely, and by bargaining in bad faith and engaging in surface bargaining. The invocation of impasse resolution procedures may not be used to avoid meaningful negotiations on mandatory subjects of bargaining. See International Brotherhood of Police Officers versus City of Hollywood. Although the union disagrees that the parties are at impasse even over TSIA fund distribution, the school district has declared an impasse on only that single issue. In doing so, the school district admits that the parties are not at impasse over any other items being or to be negotiated. It is the school district's stated intention to continue negotiations on all other wages, benefits, and terms and conditions of employment while simultaneously proceeding with an impasse resolution proceeding solely over the TSIA fund distribution. Allowing a party to declare impasse piecemeal violates the act and creates a possibility of multiple impasse proceedings, multiple special magistrate hearings, multiple legislative body hearings, and multiple ratification elections relating to a single fiscal year or contract. Florida statute 447.4032A requires the submission of all unresolved issues to a special magistrate acceptable to both parties, and the commission has explained that the purpose of the impasse resolution procedure in 447.403 is to bring collective bargaining to conclusion. The Public Employee Relations Act does not contemplate or permit multiple piecemeal impasse proceedings. The National Labor Relations Board has established when parties are engaged in negotiations for collective bargaining, the employer must refrain from implementing any changes in terms and conditions of employment until an agreement or overall impasse has been reached on bargaining for the agreement as a whole. Furthermore, a reasonable period of negotiation has not transpired. Impasse was declared prematurely after only 2 bargaining sessions without any meaningful negotiations over TSIA, let alone wages, benefits, or other terms and conditions of employment. Indeed, in its September 29th, 2025 declaration of impasse, although purportedly limited to TSIA funds, the school district also included language on parental and personal leave, which had never been brought to the bargaining table and negotiated. Impasse was declared 13 days after the parties' initial bargaining session, before the union had ever brought to the table all of the issues to be negotiated. Even with respect to the TSA fund distribution, the school district refused meaningful negotiation by threatening to declare impasse if the union rejected its MOU, and then declaring impasse before any negotiations on the MOU ever occurred. The school district's presentation of an initial offer, followed by its declaration of impasse in less than 1 week before any meaningful bargaining occurred, constitutes bad faith bargaining. The union demands and awards attorney fees and costs. And so that was filed today over the piecemealing of the impasse over the TSA funds. I know we've been getting a lot of questions on that from our folks. This is kind of unprecedented because in the times where either party on either side has declared impasse, it's been over a true deadlock over all the items on the table. And so we wanted to make sure that our folks, before we send out messaging, were aware of how that is proceeding. And so with that, we don't have any other things to bring forth to you tonight. We will work on these counters, and our folks be on the lookout for some surveys coming out. And we encourage you to take them because that is how you make your voice heard in this process.
So I guess lastly, we will be done. We're going off record. And I just want to confirm, and I'm looking at my team, it was 11:19 was
Yeah.
our next session to come together. And it was going to be 4:30 to
Mhm.
7:30 again.
Yes, sir.
So with that, we'll shut the videos down. And
Okay.
we'll be done
Thank
for
you.
tonight. Yep.